What if I told you that the difference between smart people and everyone else isn't what you think it is? It's not about having a higher IQ, attending prestigious schools, or being born with exceptional talent. The real secret lies in something much simpler, yet more powerful. Smart people have cracked the code of continuous learning. They've discovered that intelligence isn't fixed. It's expandable. While most people stop learning after formal education, truly intelligent individuals treat every single day as an opportunity to grow, adapt, and evolve. They understand that in our rapidly changing world, yesterday's knowledge becomes tomorrow's limitation. The most successful people you admire, the innovators who shape industries, the leaders who inspire millions, they all share one common trait. They never stop learning. They're not necessarily smarter than you. They've just figured out how to get smarter every single day. Today, you're going to discover the exact strategies, habits, and mindsets that separate the top 1% from everyone else. By the end of this video, you'll have a complete blueprint for accelerating your intelligence and staying ahead of 99% of people for the rest of your life. Chapter 1. The Growth Mindset Revolution. The single most important discovery in modern psychology might be the difference between a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. This isn't just academic theory. This is the foundation that determines whether you'll spend your life stagnating or continuously ascending to new levels of capability and success. People with a fixed mindset believe that intelligence, talent, and abilities are set in stone. They think you're either smart or you're not, either talented or you lack talent. When they encounter challenges, they see them as threats to their identity. When they fail, they interpret it as proof that they're not good enough. This mindset is absolutely devastating because it creates a ceiling on your potential that you impose on yourself. But here's where it gets fascinating. People with a growth mindset see intelligence as something that can be developed. They view challenges as opportunities to grow stronger. They see failure not as a reflection of their worth, but as valuable feedback that guides their next steps. This small shift in perspective creates an entirely different life trajectory. When you truly internalize that your brain is like a muscle that grows stronger with use, everything changes. The neuroscience behind this is remarkable. Your brain has something called neuroplasticity, which means it literally rewires itself based on your experiences and efforts. Every time you learn something new, your brain forms new neural connections. Every time you practice a skill, those connections become stronger and faster. This process continues throughout your entire life, which means you can become significantly more intelligent at any age. Smart people understand this at a deep level. They don't see their current abilities as limitations. They see them as starting points. When they encounter something they don't understand, instead of saying, "I'm not good at this," they say, "I'm not good at this yet." That simple word, "yet," changes everything because it acknowledges that abilities can be developed. This mindset shift has profound practical implications. When you believe you can improve, you're willing to take on challenges that might initially seem beyond your capabilities. You're willing to persist through difficulties because you know that struggle is the mechanism of growth. You start to embrace the discomfort of not knowing because you understand it's temporary and necessary for expansion. Research shows that students who are taught about neuroplasticity and growth mindset significantly improve their academic performance. But this goes far beyond academics. In business, employees with growth mindsets are more innovative, more resilient, and more likely to advance in their careers. In relationships, people with growth mindsets are better at resolving conflicts and building deeper connections. In every area of life, believing that you can improve actually makes improvement more likely. The key is to start catching yourself when you slip into fixed mindset thinking. When you hear yourself saying, "I'm just not a math person," or "I'm terrible at public speaking," pause and reframe it. Add the word "yet" to the end of the sentence. Better yet, ask yourself, how can I get better at this? This simple question shifts your brain from a defensive, limiting mode to a creative, problem-solving mode. Smart people also understand that intelligence comes in many forms. You might not be naturally gifted at mathematics, but you could have exceptional, emotional intelligence. You might struggle with traditional academic subjects, but excel at creative problem-solving. The goal isn't to be good at everything. It's to identify your natural strengths and systematically develop them while also working on areas that matter for your goals. Chapter 2. The Power of Microlearning. Most people think that learning requires large blocks of time, formal courses, or intensive study sessions. This belief is one of the biggest barriers to continuous growth because it makes learning feel overwhelming and impractical given our busy lives. Smart people have discovered a completely different approach: microlearning. They understand that small, consistent doses of learning are far more effective than sporadic, intensive efforts. The science behind this is compelling. Your brain processes and consolidates information better when it's received in smaller chunks over time, rather than in large quantities all at once. This phenomenon, known as the spacing effect, shows that distributed learning leads to better retention and deeper understanding than massed learning. When you learn something new, your brain needs time to encode that information into long-term memory. By spacing out your learning, you give your brain multiple opportunities to strengthen those neural pathways. Consider this. If you spend just 10 minutes a day learning something new, that adds up to over 60 hours of learning in a year. That's equivalent to more than a week of full-time study. The remarkable thing is that 10 minutes feels manageable to anyone, but 60 hours feels like a significant commitment. This is the power of microlearning. It makes continuous education feel effortless while delivering substantial results. Smart people apply this principle systematically. They might listen to educational podcasts during their commute, read articles during lunch breaks, or watch educational videos before bed. They understand that every small moment is an opportunity to grow. They don't wait for perfect conditions or large blocks of time. They seize whatever time they have available. The key to effective microlearning is consistency and intentionality. Random learning is less effective than focused learning aligned with your goals. Smart people identify specific areas they want to develop and then systematically expose themselves to high-quality information in those areas. They might spend 5 minutes a day reading about negotiation tactics if they want to improve their business skills, or 10 minutes studying a new language if they want to expand their cultural competence. One of the most powerful microlearning strategies is the technique of active recall. Instead of passively consuming information, smart people regularly test themselves on what they've learned. After reading an article, they close it and try to summarize the key points from memory. After listening to a podcast, they explain the main concepts to someone else. This active engagement with the material dramatically improves retention and understanding. Another crucial element is connecting new information to existing knowledge. Smart people don't just accumulate random facts. They build interconnected webs of knowledge. When they learn something new, they ask themselves how it relates to what they already know, how it challenges their existing beliefs, and how they can apply it in their life or work. This creates a rich, integrated understanding rather than isolated pieces of information. Technology has made microlearning easier and more accessible than ever before. There are countless apps, podcasts, YouTube channels, and online courses designed specifically for bite-sized learning. Smart people leverage these tools strategically. They curate their information diet just as carefully as they curate their food diet, choosing high-quality sources that align with their learning objectives. The compound effect of microlearning is extraordinary. Just as small amounts of money invested consistently can grow into substantial wealth through compound interest, small amounts of learning invested consistently can grow into substantial expertise and wisdom. The person who reads for 10 minutes a day will read dozens of books per year. The person who practices a skill for 15 minutes daily will develop noticeable competence within months. Smart people also understand that microlearning works best when it's enjoyable. They choose learning methods that engage them rather than bore them. If traditional reading feels tedious, they might prefer audiobooks or video content. If passive learning feels ineffective, they might prefer interactive courses or discussions with others. The goal is to find approaches that feel sustainable and engaging over the long term. Chapter 3. Strategic Information Consumption. In our information-saturated world, the ability to learn isn't limited by access to information. It's limited by the ability to filter and process information effectively. Smart people understand that not all information is created equal. They've developed sophisticated systems for identifying, consuming, and applying high-value information while avoiding the noise that distracts and overwhelms most people. The first principle of strategic information consumption is selectivity. While average people consume information randomly and reactively, smart people are intentional and proactive about their information diet. They recognize that their attention is their most valuable resource, and they guard it carefully. They ask themselves critical questions before consuming any piece of content. Will this information help me achieve my goals? Is this source credible and authoritative? Is this the best use of my limited time and mental energy? Smart people have learned to distinguish between information and knowledge. Information is raw data, facts and opinions that exist everywhere around us. Knowledge is information that has been processed, understood, and integrated into a useful framework. Wisdom is knowledge that has been applied successfully in real-world situations. Most people get stuck at the information level, constantly consuming but never truly learning. Smart people focus on converting information into knowledge and knowledge into wisdom. One of the most important skills they develop is source evaluation. They understand that the credibility and expertise of the source dramatically affects the value of the information. They prioritize learning from people who have achieved what they want to achieve, who have deep expertise in relevant areas, and who have a track record of accurate insights and predictions. They're skeptical of information from sources with obvious biases, conflicts of interest, or limited expertise. Smart people also understand the importance of primary sources versus secondary sources. Instead of relying solely on summaries, interpretations, or opinions about important topics, they often go directly to original research, foundational texts, and first-hand accounts. This gives them a deeper, more nuanced understanding and helps them avoid the distortions that occur when information passes through multiple filters. They've mastered the art of skimming and scanning to quickly identify valuable content. They don't feel obligated to consume everything in its entirety. Instead, they quickly assess whether a book, article, or video contains information relevant to their goals. If it does, they engage deeply. If not, they move on without guilt. This skill allows them to process much larger volumes of potentially valuable content and identify the gems worth their full attention. Cross-referencing is another crucial strategy. Smart people rarely rely on single sources for important information. They seek out multiple perspectives on significant topics, looking for patterns and inconsistencies. This helps them develop more accurate mental models and avoid being misled by biased or incomplete information. They understand that truth often emerges from the intersection of multiple viewpoints rather than from any single source. They also understand the importance of balancing breadth and depth. While it's important to have a broad understanding of many topics, it's equally important to develop deep expertise in areas that matter most for your goals. Smart people identify their core domains of focus and invest heavily in those areas while maintaining a lighter touch in other areas. This prevents them from becoming superficial generalists, while also avoiding the tunnel vision that can come from excessive specialization. Smart people are also strategic about timing their information consumption. They recognize that their mental energy varies throughout the day and week, and they align their learning activities with their natural rhythms. They might consume challenging, technical content when their minds are fresh and lighter, entertainment-oriented content when they're tired. They understand that the same information consumed at different times can have dramatically different impacts on learning and retention. They've developed systems for capturing and organizing important information. Whether it's through note-taking apps, physical notebooks, or mental frameworks, they ensure that valuable insights don't get lost in the flood of daily information. They regularly review and synthesize their notes, looking for connections and patterns that might not have been obvious during initial consumption. Perhaps most importantly, smart people focus on actionable information. They constantly ask themselves how they can apply what they're learning. Information that can't be applied is often forgotten quickly, while information that gets put into practice becomes integrated into their capabilities and habits. They don't just read about productivity techniques. They experiment with implementing them. They don't just study negotiation strategies. They practice using them in real situations. Chapter 4. Building cognitive flexibility. Cognitive flexibility is perhaps the most underrated component of intelligence, yet it's becoming increasingly crucial in our rapidly changing world. It's the ability to adapt your thinking when new information contradicts your existing beliefs, to switch between different mental frameworks depending on the situation, and to see problems from multiple angles simultaneously. While most people develop rigid thought patterns and stick to familiar approaches, smart people cultivate mental agility that allows them to thrive in complex, ambiguous, and changing environments. The foundation of cognitive flexibility is intellectual humility. This is the recognition that your current understanding is incomplete, and that you might be wrong about things you feel certain about. Smart people hold their beliefs lightly, treating them as working hypotheses rather than absolute truths. They're genuinely curious about evidence that contradicts their views, because they understand that being wrong is an opportunity to become more right. This mindset is uncomfortable for most people because it requires giving up the psychological comfort of certainty. But it's essential for continuous learning and growth. One of the most powerful exercises for developing cognitive flexibility is actively seeking out opposing viewpoints. Instead of surrounding themselves with people who think the same way, smart people deliberately expose themselves to different perspectives, cultures, and ways of thinking. They read books by authors they disagree with, engage in conversations with people who have different values, and study how problems are approached in different fields and industries. This doesn't mean they're wishy-washy or constantly changing their minds. It means they're gathering more complete information before forming strong opinions. Smart people also practice mental model switching. They understand that different situations require different ways of thinking. The analytical thinking that works well for financial planning might be less effective for creative problem-solving. The systematic approach that works for managing projects might be too rigid for navigating interpersonal relationships. They develop a toolkit of different mental frameworks and practice switching between them based on the demands of the situation. Another crucial aspect of cognitive flexibility is comfort with ambiguity and uncertainty. While most people feel anxious when they don't have clear answers or definitive information, smart people have learned to function effectively in uncertain environments. They understand that many important decisions must be made with incomplete information, and that waiting for perfect clarity often means missing opportunities. They develop decision-making frameworks that help them move forward despite uncertainty, while remaining open to adjusting course as new information emerges. Pattern recognition across different domains is another hallmark of cognitive flexibility. Smart people study how principles and strategies from one field might apply to completely different areas. They might apply lessons from biology to business strategy, insights from physics to personal relationships, or techniques from athletics to intellectual performance. This cross-pollination of ideas often leads to breakthrough innovations and novel solutions to persistent problems. Smart people also practice scenario thinking. Instead of assuming the future will unfold in a predictable way, they regularly consider multiple possible futures and how they might respond to different scenarios. This mental exercise helps them prepare for various contingencies and makes them less likely to be blindsided by unexpected changes. They ask questions like, what if this assumption is wrong? How would I approach this problem if I had different constraints? And what would someone from a completely different background do in this situation? The ability to zoom in and zoom out is another important dimension of cognitive flexibility. Smart people can focus intensely on specific details when necessary, but they can also step back and see the bigger picture. They can think in terms of immediate actions and long-term consequences, individual decisions, and systemic patterns. This multi-level thinking helps them make better decisions and avoid the tunnel vision that comes from operating at only one level of analysis. Experimentation is a natural extension of cognitive flexibility. Smart people treat their approaches and strategies as experiments rather than permanent commitments. They're willing to try new methods even when their current approaches are working reasonably well. They understand that what works in one context might not work in another, and that conditions are constantly changing in ways that might make current approaches obsolete. They also practice perspective-taking, deliberately trying to see situations from other people's points of view. This isn't just about empathy. Although empathy is important, it's about understanding that different people have different information, priorities, and constraints that lead them to different conclusions. By understanding these different perspectives, smart people can communicate more effectively, anticipate how others will respond to their actions, and find creative solutions that work for multiple stakeholders. Finally, smart people understand that cognitive flexibility requires ongoing maintenance. Just as physical flexibility requires regular stretching and exercise, mental flexibility requires regular challenges to your thinking. They actively seek out new experiences, learn new skills that challenge their existing capabilities, and put themselves in situations where their usual approaches might not work. This continuous stretching of their mental capabilities ensures that they remain adaptable and resilient as the world around them changes. Chapter 5. The Art of Active Curiosity. Curiosity is often dismissed as a nice-to-have trait, something that makes people more interesting but not necessarily more successful. This is a profound mistake. Curiosity is actually one of the most powerful drivers of intelligence and achievement. It's the engine that motivates continuous learning, the compass that guides exploration toward valuable discoveries, and the fuel that sustains intellectual effort when it becomes difficult or boring. Smart people don't just happen to be curious. They actively cultivate and channel their curiosity in strategic ways. The first thing to understand about curiosity is that it's not a passive state of mind. It's an active process of questioning, exploring, and investigating. While passive curiosity might lead you to wonder about something momentarily, active curiosity compels you to actually seek answers, conduct experiments, and pursue understanding until you achieve genuine insight. Smart people have developed the habit of following their curiosity wherever it leads, even when it takes them into unfamiliar or challenging territory. Active curiosity begins with better questions. While most people ask superficial questions that can be answered quickly and easily, smart people ask deeper questions that reveal fundamental principles and underlying patterns. Instead of asking, "What happened?" they ask, "Why did this happen?" And "What does this tell us about how similar situations might unfold?" Instead of asking, "How do I solve this specific problem?" they ask, "What class of problems does this represent? And what general principles might help me solve all problems in this category?" One of the most powerful questioning techniques is the 5 whys method. When you encounter something interesting or problematic, ask why, and then continue asking why to each subsequent answer until you've dug down to root causes or fundamental principles. This simple technique often reveals surprising insights and connections that aren't visible on the surface level. Smart people use this approach not just for problem solving, but for understanding any phenomenon that captures their attention. Smart people also practice lateral curiosity, exploring connections between seemingly unrelated topics. While most people study subjects in isolation, curious individuals constantly ask, "How does this relate to that?" And "What would happen if I combined these ideas?" This cross-pollination of concepts from different fields often leads to breakthrough insights and innovative solutions. Many of the greatest discoveries in human history have come from people who were curious enough to explore connections across traditional boundaries. Another hallmark of active curiosity is the willingness to follow interesting tangents. While conventional wisdom suggests staying focused and avoiding distractions, smart people understand that some of the most valuable learning happens when you allow yourself to explore unexpected paths. They practice what might be called controlled wandering, giving themselves permission to follow interesting side trails while maintaining enough awareness to return to their main objectives when appropriate. Smart people also develop what could be called strategic ignorance awareness. They're constantly scanning for gaps in their knowledge, especially gaps that might be limiting their effectiveness or understanding. Instead of pretending they know everything or avoiding topics they find challenging, they actively seek out their blind spots and knowledge gaps. They ask themselves questions like, "What important things don't I know about this topic?" And "What assumptions am I making that might be wrong?" The practice of active curiosity also involves seeking out mystery and complexity rather than avoiding it. While most people prefer simple, clear-cut answers, curious individuals are drawn to nuanced, ambiguous, and multifaceted phenomena. They understand that the most interesting and valuable insights often lie in the gray areas where simple explanations break down. They're willing to sit with confusion and uncertainty because they know that real understanding often emerges slowly from wrestling with complex ideas. Smart people also understand that curiosity can be systematically developed and directed. They create what might be called curiosity systems, structured approaches for exploring topics that interest them. This might involve maintaining a list of fascinating questions to investigate, setting aside regular time for pure exploration, or creating learning projects that combine multiple interests. They understand that while spontaneous curiosity is valuable, intentional curiosity is even more powerful. They also practice curiosity about people and relationships, not just abstract concepts and technical topics. They're genuinely interested in understanding how other people think, what motivates them, how they make decisions, and what they've learned from their experiences. This social curiosity makes them better collaborators, leaders, and friends, while also providing them with insights they couldn't gain through solitary study. Perhaps most importantly, smart people maintain curiosity about themselves. They regularly examine their own thinking processes, emotional patterns, and behavioral habits. They ask themselves questions like, "Why do I react this way to this type of situation?" And "What beliefs am I holding that might be limiting my effectiveness?" This self-directed curiosity leads to greater self-awareness and more intentional personal development. The compound effect of active curiosity over time is extraordinary. Each question leads to new knowledge, which suggests new questions, which lead to deeper understanding, which opens up new possibilities for action and achievement. Curious people don't just accumulate more facts, they develop richer mental models of how the world works, and these models make them more effective at navigating complex challenges and identifying valuable opportunities. In essence, curiosity doesn't just make you smarter, it makes your intelligence more useful and impactful. Chapter 6. Deep Work and Focus Mastery. In our hyper-connected world, the ability to focus deeply has become a rare and increasingly valuable skill. While most people are trapped in cycles of constant distraction, smart people have learned to cultivate what researchers call deep work, the ability to focus without distraction on cognitively demanding tasks. This isn't just about productivity. It's about accessing higher levels of cognitive performance that are impossible to achieve in a scattered, reactive state of mind. The modern world is deliberately designed to fragment your attention. Every notification, email alert, and social media update is engineered by teams of neuroscientists and behavioral psychologists to capture and hold your focus. Companies spend billions of dollars studying how to make their products more addictive, more compelling, and harder to ignore. Your attention has become the most valuable commodity in the digital economy, and it's under constant assault But here's what most people don't understand. Your ability to focus deeply isn't just about getting more done. It's about the quality of work you can produce. When you're constantly switching between tasks, checking your phone, and responding to interruptions, your brain never reaches the depths of concentration required for truly innovative thinking. You're operating in a state of what researchers call continuous partial attention, where you're always somewhat distracted and never fully engaged with any single task. Deep work, in contrast, allows you to push your cognitive capabilities to their limit. It's in these extended periods of uninterrupted focus that breakthrough insights emerge, complex problems get solved, and high-value skills get developed. The difference in output quality between deep work and shallow work isn't incremental, it's exponential. An hour of focused, uninterrupted work can often accomplish more than an entire day of fragmented effort. Smart people understand that deep work is a skill that must be systematically developed. Like physical fitness, it requires training, discipline, and gradual progression. You can't expect to suddenly focus deeply for hours if you've been operating in a state of constant distraction. Your attention span is like a muscle that has atrophied from disuse, and it needs to be gradually strengthened through deliberate practice. The first step in developing deep work capacity is understanding the different types of focus and when each is most valuable. There's controlled attention, which is the effortful concentration required for challenging cognitive tasks. There's selective attention, which involves filtering out distractions while maintaining focus on relevant information. And there's sustained attention, which is the ability to maintain focus over extended periods. Each type of attention serves different purposes and requires different training approaches. One of the most powerful deep work strategies is time blocking, where you schedule specific blocks of time for focused work and treat them as non-negotiable appointments. During these blocks, you eliminate all potential sources of distraction. Your phone goes into airplane mode, your computer notifications are turned off, and you create a physical environment that supports sustained concentration. The key is to start small, perhaps with 9 minute blocks, and gradually increase the duration as your focus capacity improves. The concept of attention residue is crucial to understand. When you switch from one task to another, part of your attention remains stuck on the previous task. This residue accumulates throughout the day, making it progressively harder to focus deeply. Smart people minimize task switching by batching similar activities and creating clear transitions between different types of work. They understand that every time they check their phone or respond to an email while trying to focus, they're paying a cognitive tax that reduces their overall performance. Environmental design plays a critical role in deep work capacity. Smart people create dedicated spaces for focused work, environments that signal to their brains that it's time for serious concentration. This might mean having a specific desk that's only used for important projects, or a particular coffee shop where they go to think deeply. The goal is to create environmental cues that automatically trigger a focused mental state. Another crucial aspect of deep work is managing your energy, not just your time. Your capacity for sustained concentration varies throughout the day based on your natural circadian rhythms, your current stress levels, and your recent activities. Smart people identify their peak focus hours and jealously guard this time for their most important cognitive work. They understand that trying to do deep work when you're mentally fatigued is like trying to run a marathon when you're physically exhausted. The practice of meditation is one of the most effective ways to strengthen your focus capacity. Regular meditation literally changes the structure of your brain, strengthening the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for executive attention, and reducing activity in the default mode network, which is associated with mind wandering. Even 10 minutes of daily meditation can significantly improve your ability to sustain attention and resist distractions. Smart people also understand the importance of cognitive load management. Every decision you make, every piece of information you process, and every distraction you resist consumes mental energy. By simplifying their environments, establishing routines, and eliminating unnecessary decisions, they preserve more cognitive resources for the work that matters most. This is why many successful people wear similar clothes every day or eat the same breakfast. They're not being uncreative, they're being strategic about conserving mental energy. The digital age has created unprecedented challenges for sustained attention, but it has also provided powerful tools for those who know how to use them strategically. Apps that block distracting websites, noise-canceling headphones that create acoustic cocoons, and digital tools that help track and improve focus all have their place in a well-designed attention management system. The key is to be intentional about which technologies you allow into your attention ecosystem. Perhaps most importantly, smart people understand that the ability to focus deeply is becoming increasingly valuable in the modern economy. As automation handles more routine tasks, the most valuable work increasingly requires creativity, complex problem-solving, and innovative thinking. These capabilities can only be developed and deployed through sustained periods of deep, focused work. In a world where most people are losing their ability to concentrate, those who can focus deeply will have an almost insurmountable advantage. Chapter 7: Systems Thinking and Mental Models. One of the most powerful distinctions between average performers and exceptional achievers is the way they understand and navigate complex systems. While most people see events as isolated occurrences and react to symptoms rather than causes, smart people develop sophisticated mental models that help them see the underlying patterns, relationships, and leverage points that drive outcomes in complex environments. Systems thinking is the ability to see beyond linear cause and effect relationships and understand how multiple variables interact over time to produce outcomes. It's recognizing that everything is connected to everything else, that small changes in one part of a system can have large effects elsewhere, and that the most effective interventions often occur at points that aren't obvious to those thinking in simple cause and effect terms. The foundation of systems thinking is understanding that most important outcomes emerge from the interaction of multiple factors rather than from single causes. When someone becomes successful, it's rarely due to one decision, one skill, or one lucky break. Success emerges from the compound effect of many small advantages, smart decisions, and strategic positioning over time. Similarly, failures and problems are typically the result of multiple contributing factors that interact in complex ways. Mental models are the cognitive frameworks that shape how you interpret information, make decisions, and predict outcomes. They're the simplified representations of reality that your brain uses to make sense of complex situations quickly. Everyone has mental models, but most people's models are unconscious, incomplete, and often inaccurate. Smart people systematically develop and refine their mental models, treating them as tools that can be improved, combined, and applied strategically. One of the most important mental models is the concept of feedback loops. In any system, actions produce consequences, which then influence future actions. Positive feedback loops amplify or accelerate change, while negative feedback loops dampen or stabilize change. Understanding these dynamics helps you predict how systems will evolve over time and identify the most effective points of intervention. For example, in personal development, confidence and competence form a positive feedback loop. As you become more competent at something, your confidence increases, which makes you more likely to take on challenges that further develop your competence. Understanding this loop helps you see why small early wins are so important and why building momentum is often more valuable than achieving perfect outcomes initially. The concept of network effects is another powerful mental model. Network effects occur when the value of a product, service, or system increases as more people use it. Social media platforms, communication tools, and many technology platforms become more valuable as they grow larger. Understanding network effects helps you identify opportunities and threats in various domains and explains why some things that seem inferior initially can dominate markets over time. Leverage is a mental model that helps you understand how small inputs can produce large outputs. In physics, a lever allows you to move heavy objects with minimal force by finding the right leverage point. In human systems, leverage might come from influencing key decision-makers, mastering high-impact skills, or positioning yourself at critical nodes in networks. Smart people are constantly looking for leverage points where their efforts can produce disproportionate results. The Pareto principle, or the 80/20 rule, is a mental model that suggests that roughly 80% of effects come from 20% of causes. While the exact ratios vary, the underlying principle that inputs and outputs are rarely distributed equally applies across many domains. A small percentage of your efforts probably produce most of your results. A small percentage of your relationships probably provide most of your opportunities. Understanding this pattern helps you focus your energy on the activities and relationships that matter most. Asymmetric risk-reward situations represent opportunities where the potential gains significantly outweigh the potential losses. These situations are often not obvious because they require looking beyond immediate, visible costs and benefits. Starting a business might seem risky, but if the potential upside is substantial and the downside is limited to time and money you can afford to lose, it might actually be a smart, asymmetric bet. The mental model of second-order thinking involves considering not just the immediate consequences of actions, but the consequences of those consequences. Most people stop at first-order thinking, what will happen immediately as a result of this action? Smart people ask what will happen after that. And after that, tracing the likely chain of effects several steps into the future. Inversion is a powerful thinking tool that involves approaching problems backward. Instead of asking, how can I succeed? You ask, how could I guarantee failure? Instead of asking, how can I be happy? You ask, what would definitely make me miserable? This approach often reveals important insights that forward thinking misses and helps you identify and avoid critical mistakes. The concept of opportunity cost is fundamental to smart decision-making. Every choice you make eliminates other potential choices. The opportunity cost of any decision is the value of the best alternative you're giving up. Smart people don't just ask whether something is good. They ask whether it's the best use of their limited time, energy, and resources. Compound interest is one of the most important mental models for long-term thinking. Small, consistent improvements compound over time to produce extraordinary results. This applies not just to financial investing, but to skill development, relationship building, and personal growth. Understanding compounding helps you appreciate the value of consistency and patience in pursuit of long-term goals. The concept of anti-fragility, developed by Nassim Taleb, describes systems that actually benefit from stress and volatility rather than just surviving them. While fragile systems break under stress and resilient systems resist stress, anti-fragile systems become stronger when exposed to controlled stressors. This mental model applies to physical fitness, immune systems, and personal development, helping you understand why challenges and difficulties are often beneficial in the long run. Smart people also understand the importance of mental model diversity. Just as biological diversity makes ecosystems more resilient, intellectual diversity makes thinking more robust. They study how problems are approached in different fields, learning from disciplines as varied as biology, physics, economics, psychology, and anthropology. This cross-pollination of ideas often leads to breakthrough insights. The key to effective mental model usage is knowing when and how to apply different models. No single model captures the full complexity of reality, but the right combination of models can provide remarkably accurate and useful understanding. Smart people develop intuition about which models are most relevant to specific situations and how to combine multiple models for richer understanding. Chapter 8. Strategic Decision. Making under uncertainty. The quality of your life is largely determined by the quality of your decisions. Yet most people approach decision-making in a haphazard, emotion-driven way. Smart people understand that decision-making is a skill that can be systematically improved through understanding cognitive biases, developing structured processes, and learning from both successes and failures. The first thing to understand about decision-making is that your brain wasn't designed for the modern world. Your cognitive machinery evolved to help you survive in small groups on the African savanna, not to navigate complex modern environments filled with abstract risks, delayed consequences, and overwhelming information. Understanding the systematic ways your intuition can mislead you is the first step toward better decisions. Confirmation bias is one of the most pervasive decision-making traps. Once you form an initial opinion, you unconsciously seek out information that confirms your belief while ignoring or discounting contradictory evidence. This feels natural because confirming information gives you a pleasant sense of being right, while contradictory information creates uncomfortable cognitive dissonance. Smart people combat confirmation bias by actively seeking out disconfirming evidence. Before making important decisions, they ask themselves, what evidence would prove me wrong? And who would disagree with this conclusion and why? They deliberately expose themselves to opposing viewpoints and try to steelman rather than strawman opposing arguments, which means presenting the strongest possible version of the opposing position rather than attacking a weak caricature. The availability heuristic causes you to overweight recent, vivid, or easily remembered events when assessing probability. If you've recently seen news coverage of airplane crashes, you'll overestimate the danger of flying. If you know someone who got rich from cryptocurrency, you'll overestimate the likelihood of success in that area. Smart people counteract this bias by seeking out base-rate information and using statistical thinking rather than relying on memorable anecdotes. Anchoring bias causes you to be overly influenced by the first piece of information you encounter about a topic. In negotiations, whoever makes the first offer sets an anchor that influences the entire discussion. In decision-making, your initial impression, or the first option you consider, tends to bias your evaluation of alternatives. Smart people recognize anchoring effects and deliberately seek out multiple reference points before making important decisions. The sunk cost fallacy leads you to continue investing in failing projects because you've already invested significant time, money, or effort. The rational approach is to evaluate future options based on their prospective value, not their past costs. But our psychological attachment to our previous investments makes this difficult. Smart people practice thinking like economists, asking, "If I was starting fresh today, what would I choose?" rather than, "How can I justify my past investments?" Loss aversion is the tendency to feel the pain of losing something more acutely than the pleasure of gaining something of equivalent value. This bias makes you overly cautious about taking reasonable risks and causes you to hold on to bad situations longer than you should, because changing feels like losing what you currently have. Understanding loss aversion helps you evaluate trade-offs more rationally by focusing on total expected value rather than just potential losses. Smart people also understand the importance of decision-making frameworks that help them structure complex choices. One powerful framework is the ICE method, which evaluates options based on impact. How much will this matter? Confidence. How certain are we about the outcomes? And ease. How difficult will this be to implement? This framework helps you identify high-value, low-risk opportunities while avoiding low-impact activities that consume disproportionate resources. Another useful framework is the 10th of October 2010 rule, which asks, "How will I feel about this decision in 10 minutes, 10 months, and 10 years?" This temporal perspective helps you balance short-term and long-term considerations and avoid decisions that feel good immediately but create long-term problems. For complex decisions with multiple criteria, smart people use weighted scoring models. They list all relevant factors, assign importance weights to each factor, score each option on each factor, and calculate weighted totals. While this process can't eliminate the subjective element of decision-making, it forces you to be explicit about your values and criteria, making it easier to identify the option that best aligns with your priorities. Smart people also distinguish between reversible and irreversible decisions. For reversible decisions with limited downside, they move quickly with minimal analysis, knowing they can adjust course if needed. For irreversible decisions with significant consequences, they invest much more time in analysis and consultation. This two-speed approach prevents both analysis paralysis on low-stakes decisions and hasty choices on high-stakes ones. The concept of optionality is crucial for decision-making under uncertainty. Options give you the right, but not the obligation, to take specific actions in the future. When the future is highly uncertain, smart decisions often involve preserving or creating options rather than committing to specific paths. This might mean developing multiple skills rather than specializing too early, or maintaining relationships across different industries rather than burning bridges. Smart people also practice probabilistic thinking rather than binary thinking. Instead of asking, "Will this work or won't it?" they ask, "What's the probability this will work, and how do I feel about those odds given the potential payoffs?" This more nuanced approach helps them make better decisions in uncertain environments and avoid the overconfidence that comes from thinking in absolutes. Scenario planning is another powerful tool for decision-making under uncertainty. Instead of trying to predict the future, smart people construct multiple plausible scenarios and evaluate how their decisions would play out under each scenario. This approach helps them identify robust strategies that work reasonably well across different possible futures and avoid strategies that only work under very specific conditions. The practice of red teaming involves deliberately trying to find flaws in your own reasoning. Before committing to important decisions, smart people assign someone, possibly themselves, to argue against the preferred option and identify potential failure modes. This adversarial approach helps surface risks and weaknesses that might otherwise be overlooked. Smart people also understand the value of timing in decision-making. They recognize that the same decision can have very different outcomes depending on when it's made. Market timing, career timing, and personal timing all affect the success probability of various choices. While you can't time everything perfectly, being aware of timing considerations helps you avoid obviously poor timing and occasionally identify particularly favorable moments. Finally, smart people maintain decision journals where they record their reasoning for important choices, their confidence levels, and their predictions about outcomes. This practice helps them learn from experience by identifying patterns in their decision-making successes and failures. It also helps them remember their original reasoning when outcomes become clear, preventing hindsight bias from distorting the lessons they draw from their experiences. Chapter 9. Building Strategic Learning Networks. Intelligence isn't just about what you know. It's about who you can learn from and how effectively you can tap into the knowledge and insights of others. Smart people understand that in our interconnected world, the ability to build and leverage learning networks is often more valuable than individual expertise. They systematically cultivate relationships with people who can expand their knowledge, challenge their thinking, and provide access to opportunities and information they couldn't obtain alone. The foundation of effective learning networks is understanding that knowledge and expertise are distributed unevenly across people and domains. No single person, no matter how brilliant, can master all relevant knowledge areas. But by building connections with people who have complementary expertise, you can effectively multiply your intellectual capabilities. This isn't about using people or being transactional in relationships. It's about creating mutually beneficial learning partnerships where everyone benefits from shared knowledge and insights. Smart people approach relationship building strategically, but authentically. They understand that the most valuable relationships are built on genuine mutual interest and respect, not on calculated self-interest. They look for people who are curious, generous with their knowledge, and committed to continuous learning. These qualities create the foundation for productive long-term learning relationships. One of the most powerful principles of learning networks is intellectual diversity. Smart people deliberately seek out relationships with people who think differently, have different backgrounds, and approach problems from different angles. This diversity prevents echo chambers and groupthink. While exposing you to ideas and perspectives you would never encounter in homogeneous networks. The goal isn't to surround yourself with people who agree with you. It's to surround yourself with people who can help you think more clearly and see blind spots in your reasoning. The concept of weak ties is crucial for understanding how networks provide access to new information and opportunities. Strong ties are your close friends and colleagues who know you well, while weak ties are acquaintances and distant connections. Research shows that weak ties are often more valuable for discovering new opportunities and information because they connect you to different clusters of people and knowledge. Smart people invest in maintaining these weaker connections through occasional check-ins, sharing interesting articles, and making helpful introductions. Mentorship relationships are a special category of learning network connections. The best mentoring relationships are bidirectional, where both parties learn from each other despite differences in experience or expertise. Smart people approach potential mentors with specific questions or challenges rather than vague requests for general advice. They also understand that mentorship often happens in small doses over time rather than in formal, intensive relationships. The principle of giving before receiving is fundamental to building strong learning networks. Smart people share knowledge, make introductions, and provide value to others before asking for help. This approach builds trust and reciprocity while establishing them as valuable network members that others want to maintain relationships with. They understand that network value compounds over time as you become known as someone who is helpful and knowledgeable. Digital platforms have dramatically expanded the possibilities for building learning networks. Social media, professional platforms, online communities, and virtual events provide access to people and ideas that would have been impossible to reach in previous generations. Smart people use these tools strategically, focusing on platforms and communities where their target learning partners are active and engaged. However, they also understand the limitations of digital relationships. The strongest learning relationships typically require some level of personal connection and trust that's difficult to build through purely digital interactions. Smart people use digital platforms to initiate connections and maintain relationships, but they look for opportunities to deepen important relationships through phone calls, video chats, or in-person meetings. The concept of knowledge arbitrage involves identifying valuable information or insights in one domain and applying them to different domains where that knowledge is less common. Learning networks facilitate this arbitrage by exposing you to expertise and information from diverse fields. Someone who understands both technology and agriculture might identify opportunities that wouldn't be visible to specialists in either field alone. Smart people also understand the importance of proximity and context in learning relationships. While digital connections are valuable, there's unique value in building relationships with people who operate in similar contexts or face similar challenges. Local professional groups, industry associations, and alumni networks can provide access to people who understand your specific challenges and opportunities. The practice of mastermind groups represents a formal structure for learning networks. These small groups of peers meet regularly to share challenges, provide feedback, and hold each other accountable for growth goals. The most effective mastermind groups include people with complementary skills and experiences who are all committed to serious personal or professional development. Teaching and sharing what you learn serves dual purposes in learning networks. First, it solidifies your own understanding through the process of explanation and answering questions. Second, it establishes your reputation as someone with valuable knowledge to share, which attracts other knowledgeable people who want to learn from you. Smart people look for opportunities to speak, write, or teach about topics they're learning, even when they don't consider themselves experts. The curation and synthesis of information from network sources is a skill that smart people develop systematically. They don't just collect information from their networks, they organize it, synthesize it, and look for patterns and connections that might not be obvious to individual sources. This synthesis often leads to insights that are more valuable than any single piece of information. Smart people also understand the importance of network maintenance. Relationships require ongoing investment to remain strong and productive. This might involve regular check-ins, sharing relevant articles or opportunities, making helpful introductions, or simply remembering and asking about important events in people's lives. The key is to maintain contact in ways that provide value rather than just consuming attention. Finally, smart people are strategic about network evolution. As their goals and interests change, they gradually shift their network investment toward people and relationships that align with their current priorities. This doesn't mean abandoning old relationships, but it does mean being intentional about where you invest your limited relationship-building energy. They understand that networks, like other investments, should be regularly evaluated and rebalanced to ensure they're serving your current and future learning goals. Chapter 10: Resilience and Anti-Fragile Adaptation. The final and perhaps most important characteristic that separates smart people from everyone else is their relationship with failure, setbacks, and adversity. While most people try to avoid difficulties and are diminished by challenges, smart people have developed what Nassim Taleb calls anti-fragility, the ability to actually become stronger and more capable as a result of facing difficulties and uncertainties. Traditional thinking about resilience focuses on the ability to bounce back from setbacks to return to your previous state after facing difficulties. But anti-fragility goes beyond resilience. It's about using challenges as opportunities for growth, learning, and improvement. It's about building systems and developing mindsets that actually benefit from volatility and stress rather than just surviving them. The foundation of anti-fragile adaptation is understanding that growth requires stress. Just as muscles grow stronger when subjected to resistance training, intellectual capabilities expand when challenged by difficult problems, and emotional resilience develops through navigating difficult situations. Smart people don't seek out unnecessary suffering, but they recognize that avoiding all challenges and discomforts ultimately makes them weaker and less capable. This principle applies across multiple dimensions of development. Intellectual anti-fragility comes from exposing yourself to ideas that challenge your beliefs, problems that stretch your capabilities, and situations that require you to think in new ways. Rather than staying in your comfort zone where your existing knowledge is sufficient, you deliberately seek out challenges that force you to grow. Physical anti-fragility involves subjecting your body to beneficial stressors through exercise, controlled exposure to temperature variations, and occasionally challenging physical demands. Mental anti-fragility develops through meditation, facing fears, and deliberately putting yourself in situations that require emotional regulation and mental toughness. One of the key insights about anti-fragility is the importance of controlled exposure to stressors. The goal isn't to expose yourself to unlimited stress, which would be destructive, but to gradually increase your capacity by facing progressively greater challenges. This is similar to the principle of progressive overload in physical training, where you gradually increase the demands on your muscles to stimulate growth. Smart people develop what might be called strategic discomfort, deliberately choosing challenges and difficulties that serve their long-term development goals. This might mean taking on projects that are at the edge of their capabilities, having difficult conversations they've been avoiding, or learning skills that feel awkward and unfamiliar initially. The concept of hormesis from biology is relevant here. Hormesis describes the phenomenon where small doses of something that would be harmful in large doses actually provide beneficial effects. This principle applies to psychological and intellectual development as well. Small doses of stress, uncertainty, and challenge can strengthen your adaptive capabilities, while large doses would be overwhelming and destructive. Failure reframing is a crucial skill for anti-fragile adaptation. While most people see failure as evidence of their inadequacy, smart people see failure as information about what doesn't work and as practice for dealing with adversity. They understand that the ability to fail quickly, learn from failures, and iterate based on feedback is often more valuable than the ability to avoid failures entirely. This doesn't mean being reckless or seeking out failures unnecessarily. It means being willing to take calculated risks where the potential for learning and growth outweighs the costs of potential failure. It also means developing the emotional and psychological skills necessary to learn from failures rather than being paralyzed or discouraged by them. The practice of negative visualization, borrowed from Stoic philosophy, helps build anti-fragile mindsets. This involves regularly imagining potential losses, setbacks, or challenges, and mentally rehearsing how you would respond. This preparation serves two purposes. It helps you appreciate what you currently have, and it builds confidence in your ability to handle difficult situations should they arise. Smart people also develop multiple backup plans and alternative pathways toward their goals. Rather than putting all their efforts into a single approach, they build redundancy into their strategies. This might mean developing multiple income streams, maintaining diverse skill sets, or cultivating relationships across different industries and domains. This redundancy provides anti-fragile benefits because when one pathway is blocked or disrupted, alternatives are available. The concept of optionality is closely related to anti-fragile adaptation. Options provide asymmetric payoffs where you can benefit from positive developments while limiting your exposure to negative developments. Smart people structure their lives and careers to maximize optionality, keeping multiple doors open and preserving the ability to pivot when new opportunities or challenges emerge. Learning from adjacent failures is another anti-fragile strategy. You don't have to experience every type of failure personally to benefit from failure-based learning. Smart people study the failures of others in their field, analyze what went wrong, and incorporate those lessons into their own strategies. This allows them to gain the benefits of failure-based learning without paying the full costs themselves. The development of emotional regulation skills is fundamental to anti-fragile adaptation. When you can manage your emotional responses to setbacks and challenges, you're more likely to make good decisions under pressure and less likely to be paralyzed by fear or overwhelmed by stress. This includes skills like mindfulness, cognitive reframing, and stress management techniques. Smart people also understand the importance of meaning-making in developing anti-fragility. When you can connect your current challenges to larger purposes and long-term goals, you're more likely to persist through difficulties and extract value from adverse experiences. This doesn't mean pretending that bad things are good, but it does mean finding ways that challenges can serve your broader development and life goals. The practice of systematic reflection helps convert experiences into wisdom. After facing challenges or setbacks, smart people take time to analyze what happened, what they learned, and how they can apply those lessons going forward. They maintain what might be called a learning log, where they record insights from both successes and failures. Finally, anti-fragile adaptation requires building support systems that can provide perspective, encouragement, and practical help during difficult times. This isn't about dependence or avoiding personal responsibility. It's about recognizing that resilience and growth are enhanced by strong relationships and community support. Smart people invest in these relationships before they need them, understanding that the time to build support networks is when you don't urgently need them. The ultimate goal of anti-fragile adaptation is to reach a point where you're not afraid of uncertainty and challenges because you're confident in your ability to handle whatever emerges. This confidence comes not from believing that nothing bad will happen, but from knowing that you have the skills, mindsets, and support systems necessary to turn whatever happens into opportunities for growth and improvement. This is perhaps the most powerful form of intelligence, the ability to transform any experience into wisdom and strength. Chapter 11. Emotional Intelligence Mastery. While traditional intelligence focuses on cognitive abilities, emotional intelligence might be the most important form of intelligence for real-world success. Smart people understand that the ability to recognize, understand, and manage emotions, both their own and others, is what enables them to build meaningful relationships, navigate complex social situations, and make better decisions under pressure. Emotional intelligence isn't about suppressing emotions or being overly emotional. It's about developing sophisticated emotional awareness and regulation skills that enhance every aspect of life. The foundation of emotional intelligence is self-awareness, the ability to recognize and understand your own emotional states as they occur. Most people experience emotions without really understanding what they're feeling or why they're feeling it. They might know they're upset but not understand whether they're feeling frustrated, disappointed, angry, or hurt. Smart people develop what researchers call emotional granularity, the ability to distinguish between subtle emotional states and understand their specific triggers and implications. This emotional self-awareness requires developing an internal monitoring system that observes your emotional states without being overwhelmed by them. It's like becoming the narrator of your own emotional experience, able to step back and observe what's happening without being completely caught up in the emotion. This observer perspective allows you to make better decisions because you're not being driven entirely by emotional impulses. Self-regulation is the next crucial component. The ability to manage and direct your emotions rather than being controlled by them. This doesn't mean suppressing emotions or trying to eliminate them, which is neither possible nor healthy. Instead, it means understanding how to channel emotional energy productively and prevent emotions from leading to destructive behaviors or poor decisions. One of the most important self-regulation skills is the ability to pause between stimulus and response. When something triggers an emotional reaction, most people react immediately based on their initial emotional impulse. Smart people have trained themselves to create a small gap between feeling and reacting, using this space to consider their options and choose their response consciously. Stress management is a critical aspect of emotional regulation. Chronic stress doesn't just feel uncomfortable, it literally impairs your cognitive functioning, making it harder to think clearly, learn effectively, and make good decisions. Smart people develop sophisticated stress management strategies, including physical practices like exercise and deep breathing, cognitive practices like reframing and perspective-taking, and lifestyle practices like boundaries and time management. Social awareness, the ability to read and understand other people's emotions, is equally important. This involves paying attention not just to what people say, but to their tone of voice, body language, facial expressions, and other nonverbal cues. Most communication is actually nonverbal, and people who can read these subtle signals have a significant advantage in understanding what's really happening in social situations. Empathy is a crucial component of social awareness, but it's more complex than most people realize. There are actually different types of empathy, including cognitive empathy, which is understanding how someone else feels intellectually, and emotional empathy, which is actually feeling what someone else feels. Smart people develop both types while learning to manage their empathic responses so they don't become overwhelmed by other people's emotions. Relationship management brings together all the other emotional intelligence skills in service of building and maintaining strong relationships. This involves skills like effective communication, conflict resolution, influence, and collaboration. Smart people understand that almost everything worthwhile in life involves other people. So the ability to build and maintain relationships is essential for achieving significant goals. One of the most important relationship skills is the ability to have difficult conversations constructively. Most people avoid conflict or handle it poorly, either becoming aggressive and damaging relationships or becoming passive and allowing problems to fester. Smart people learn to address conflicts directly but diplomatically, focusing on solving problems rather than winning arguments. Active listening is another crucial relationship skill that most people think they have but haven't actually developed. True active listening involves focusing completely on understanding the other person's perspective, asking clarifying questions, and reflecting back what you've heard to ensure accurate understanding. This level of listening makes other people feel heard and understood, which is fundamental to building trust and rapport. The ability to influence and persuade others ethically is also part of emotional intelligence. This isn't about manipulation. It's about understanding how to present ideas in ways that resonate with other people's values and interests. Smart people understand that influence is most effective when it's based on genuine mutual benefit and respect. Emotional intelligence also involves understanding how emotions affect decision-making. Research shows that people with damaged emotional centers in their brains, even when their cognitive abilities remain intact, make consistently poor decisions. Emotions provide crucial information about our values, preferences, and the likely consequences of different choices. Smart people learn to integrate emotional and rational information in their decision-making processes. The development of emotional intelligence is a lifelong process that requires consistent practice and reflection. Smart people regularly examine their emotional patterns, seek feedback from others about their interpersonal effectiveness, and continuously work to improve their emotional skills. They understand that emotional intelligence, like other forms of intelligence, can be developed through deliberate practice. Cultural intelligence is an extension of emotional intelligence that's becoming increasingly important in our globalized world. This involves understanding how cultural differences affect communication styles, relationship expectations, and social norms. Smart people develop sensitivity to cultural variations and adapt their communication and behavior appropriately when interacting with people from different backgrounds. Finally, smart people understand that emotional intelligence is not about being nice or agreeable all the time. Sometimes emotional intelligence requires setting firm boundaries, delivering difficult feedback, or making unpopular decisions. The key is doing these things in ways that preserve relationships and maintain respect while still achieving necessary outcomes. Chapter 12. Advanced Communication and Persuasion. Communication is the vehicle through which intelligence becomes influence and knowledge becomes impact. While many people think communication is simply about speaking clearly or writing well, smart people understand that masterful communication is a sophisticated skill that involves psychology, strategy, and deep understanding of human nature. They recognize that the ability to convey ideas persuasively, build consensus, and inspire action is often more valuable than raw intelligence or technical expertise. The foundation of advanced communication is understanding that communication is fundamentally about the receiver, not the sender. Most people focus on what they want to say rather than on how their message will be received and interpreted. Smart people start by understanding their audience's existing beliefs, values, interests, and concerns. They craft their messages to resonate with their audience's perspective rather than simply expressing their own viewpoint. Framing is one of the most powerful communication tools. The same information can be presented in dramatically different ways depending on how it's framed, and these different framings can lead to completely different responses. Smart people understand that facts don't speak for themselves. They must be interpreted within frameworks that make them meaningful and compelling to the audience. For example, a proposed change at work can be framed as fixing problems with the current system, or as building capabilities for future opportunities. Both framings might be accurate, but they create very different emotional responses and implications for action. The first framing suggests something is broken and needs repair, while the second suggests growth and advancement. Smart communicators choose framings that align with their strategic objectives and their audience's motivations. Storytelling is another crucial advanced communication skill. Humans are wired to understand and remember information when it's presented in narrative form. Stories create emotional engagement, make abstract concepts concrete, and help people remember key messages long after the details of logical arguments are forgotten. Smart people develop repertoires of stories that illustrate important principles and use these stories strategically to make their communications more impactful. The most effective stories for persuasive communication often follow a simple structure. A relatable character faces a challenge or opportunity, encounters obstacles, learns important lessons, and achieves a resolution that demonstrates key principles. This structure creates emotional investment and helps audiences see themselves in similar situations, making the lessons more personally relevant. Understanding cognitive biases is essential for advanced communication. People don't process information objectively. They interpret everything through various mental shortcuts and biases that evolve to help us make quick decisions. Smart communicators understand these biases and design their messages to work with them rather than against them. Confirmation bias, for instance, leads people to seek out information that confirms their existing beliefs while ignoring contradictory evidence. Smart communicators address this by finding ways to connect new ideas to existing beliefs rather than challenging those beliefs directly. They look for common ground and shared values that can serve as bridges to new concepts. Social proof is a powerful bias where people look to others' behavior to determine what's appropriate or correct. Smart communicators leverage this by highlighting how others, especially people the audience respects, have already embraced the ideas or actions being proposed. Testimonials, case studies, and examples of successful implementation all tap into social proof dynamics. The principle of reciprocity suggests that people feel obligated to return favors and respond positively to those who have helped them. Smart communicators apply this by providing value before asking for anything in return. They might share useful information, make helpful introductions, or offer assistance before proposing their own ideas or requests. Timing and sequence are crucial elements of persuasive communication. The same message can have dramatically different effects depending on when and how it's delivered. Smart communicators understand concepts like the primacy effect, where first impressions disproportionately influence subsequent judgments, and the recency effect, where the last thing people hear has heightened impact. They also understand the importance of preparation and priming. Before delivering important messages, they prepare their audiences by establishing credibility, building rapport, and creating appropriate emotional states. They understand that people are more receptive to certain messages when they're in certain mindsets, and they work to create those mindsets. Multimodal communication is another advanced skill. Smart people understand that different people process information in different ways, and that the most effective communication often involves multiple channels. They might combine logical arguments with emotional appeals, verbal explanations with visual demonstrations, and abstract concepts with concrete examples. This redundancy ensures that their messages reach people regardless of their preferred communication styles. The ability to adapt communication style in real time based on feedback is a hallmark of advanced communicators. They pay close attention to both verbal and non-verbal responses from their audiences and adjust their approach accordingly. If they sense confusion, they provide more explanation or examples. If they sense resistance, they might acknowledge concerns or shift their framing. If they sense engagement, they might deepen their exploration of the topic. Questioning is a sophisticated communication tool that smart people use strategically. Rather than just making statements, they ask questions that guide others to reach desired conclusions themselves. This Socratic approach is often more persuasive than direct argument because people are more committed to conclusions they feel they've reached independently. Different types of questions serve different purposes. Open-ended questions gather information and encourage exploration. Leading questions guide thinking in specific directions. Hypothetical questions help people consider new possibilities. Clarifying questions demonstrate listening and ensure understanding. Smart communicators develop facility with all these questioning techniques. Advanced communicators also understand the power of silence and pacing. They know when to speak and when to remain quiet, allowing others to process information or fill comfortable silences with their own thoughts. They understand that rushing through important messages reduces their impact, and that strategic pauses can create emphasis and allow for reflection. Finally, smart people understand that communication is ultimately about building relationships, not just transferring information. They recognize that people are more likely to be influenced by those they trust and respect. So they invest in building these relationships over time. They understand that credibility and rapport are prerequisites for effective communication, and that these qualities are built through consistent, authentic, and helpful interactions. Chapter 13. Creative Problem-Solving and Innovation. The ability to solve problems creatively and generate innovative solutions is what separates smart people from those who merely follow established procedures. While conventional thinking applies existing solutions to familiar problems, creative problem-solving involves developing new approaches to challenges and finding unexpected solutions that others miss. Smart people cultivate creativity not as a mysterious talent, but as a systematic capability that can be developed and applied strategically. Creative problem-solving begins with problem definition. Most people accept problems as they're initially presented, but smart people understand that how you define a problem largely determines what solutions are possible. They spend time reframing problems from multiple angles, asking questions like, "What if this isn't really the problem?" And "What problem are we really trying to solve?" This exploration often reveals that the apparent problem is actually a symptom of a deeper issue. One powerful technique for problem redefinition is asking why multiple times to get to root causes. If the problem seems to be low employee engagement, asking why might reveal issues with management communication, which might stem from unclear company vision, which might reflect fundamental strategic confusion. Solving the surface problem might provide temporary relief, but solving the root problem creates lasting improvement. Another approach is to examine problems from different stakeholder perspectives. A problem that looks like a technology issue from an IT perspective might look like a training issue from a user perspective, or a communication issue from a management perspective. Each viewpoint reveals different aspects of the challenge and suggests different solution approaches. Constraint removal is a fundamental creative thinking technique. Most problems seem difficult because we unconsciously assume certain limitations that may not actually exist. Smart people systematically identify and question these assumed constraints, asking, "What if budget weren't a limitation?" Or, "What if we didn't have to use existing systems?" This doesn't mean ignoring real constraints, but it helps identify which limitations are genuine and which are artificial. The technique of analogical thinking involves looking for similar problems in completely different domains and adapting successful solutions from those domains. For example, the challenges of managing traffic flow might be solved using principles from computer networking, or issues with team communication might be addressed using concepts from jazz improvisation. This cross-pollination of ideas often leads to breakthrough solutions. Systematic idea generation is another crucial skill. While many people wait for inspiration to strike, smart people use structured techniques to generate large numbers of potential solutions. Brainstorming, when done properly, can be effective, but it requires following specific rules. Quantity over quality initially, no criticism during generation, building on others' ideas, and encouraging wild possibilities. The concept of combinatorial creativity suggests that many innovations come from combining existing ideas in new ways rather than creating entirely new concepts. Smart people maintain awareness of trends, technologies, and solutions across multiple fields, looking for interesting combinations that might solve current problems. The iPhone, for example, combined existing technologies like touchscreens, internet connectivity, and portable computers in a new way. Design thinking provides a systematic framework for creative problem-solving that smart people often employ. This approach emphasizes empathy for users, definition of problems from user perspectives, ideation without immediate judgment, prototyping of potential solutions, and testing with real users. This human-centered approach often reveals solutions that purely technical or analytical approaches miss. The concept of productive failure is important in creative problem-solving. Smart people understand that generating bad ideas is often a necessary step toward generating good ideas. They're willing to explore approaches that might not work, knowing that these explorations often reveal insights that lead to successful solutions. They treat failed attempts as learning opportunities rather than as evidence of inability. Incubation is a crucial but often overlooked part of the creative process. After intense focus on a problem, stepping away and allowing unconscious processing can lead to sudden insights. Smart people deliberately build incubation time into their problem-solving process, working intensively on problems and then engaging in unrelated activities that allow their unconscious minds to work on the challenges. Many breakthrough insights occur during activities like walking, showering, or casual conversation because these activities occupy the conscious mind lightly while allowing unconscious processing to continue. Smart people recognize these patterns and create conditions that facilitate insight generation. The ability to prototype and iterate quickly is essential for innovation. Rather than trying to develop perfect solutions immediately, smart people create rough versions of potential solutions and test them rapidly. This approach allows them to learn quickly what works and what doesn't, refining their approaches based on real feedback rather than theoretical speculation. In the modern world, this might involve creating mock-ups, running small experiments, or building minimum viable products. The key is to make learning cheap and fast, so you can explore many possibilities without committing significant resources to any single approach until you have evidence of effectiveness. Smart people also understand the importance of diverse perspectives in creative problem-solving. They seek input from people with different backgrounds, expertise, and thinking styles. They understand that homogeneous groups often produce conventional solutions because everyone brings similar assumptions and approaches to problems. Environmental factors significantly influence creative thinking. Smart people create physical and social environments that support creativity, which might include spaces for both focused work and casual interaction, access to diverse information sources, and cultures that encourage experimentation and learning from failure. Finally, smart people understand that creativity is not just about generating ideas, but about implementing them effectively. They develop skills in evaluation and selection, choosing which ideas are worth pursuing based on criteria like feasibility, impact, and alignment with goals. They also understand that innovation often requires persistence, as initial implementations rarely work perfectly and require refinement based on experience. Chapter 14. Time, Management, and Energy Optimization. Smart people understand that intelligence without proper time and energy management is like having a powerful sports car without fuel or a skilled driver. They recognize that their cognitive abilities are finite resources that must be carefully managed and strategically deployed to achieve maximum impact. Rather than trying to do everything, they focus on optimizing their performance in the activities that matter most. The foundation of effective time management is understanding that not all hours are created equal. Your cognitive capabilities vary dramatically throughout the day based on your natural circadian rhythms, energy levels, stress, and fatigue. Smart people identify their peak performance windows and zealously protect these times for their most important and challenging work. They understand that an hour of focused work during peak performance can accomplish more than several hours of work when energy is low. Energy management is actually more important than time management. You can't create more time, but you can significantly influence your energy levels through strategic choices about sleep, nutrition, exercise, and stress management. Smart people treat their energy as their most valuable resource and make decisions based on energy optimization, not just time allocation. Sleep is the foundation of cognitive performance. Yet many people sacrifice sleep in the mistaken belief that working longer hours leads to better results. Research consistently shows that sleep deprivation impairs decision-making, creativity, memory formation, and emotional regulation. Smart people prioritize sleep quality and quantity, understanding that being well-rested is a competitive advantage. Physical exercise has profound effects on cognitive function that go far beyond physical health. Exercise increases the production of brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which supports the growth of new neural connections. It also improves mood, reduces stress hormones, and increases energy levels. Smart people view exercise not as time taken away from work, but as an investment in cognitive performance. Nutrition directly affects brain function, energy levels, and mood. Smart people understand that their food choices influence their cognitive capabilities and make eating decisions strategically. They avoid foods that cause energy crashes, maintain stable blood sugar levels, and ensure adequate hydration. They understand that what they eat for lunch affects their afternoon productivity. The principle of attention management is crucial for cognitive optimization. Your attention is constantly under assault from notifications, interruptions, and distractions. Smart people create environments and systems that protect their attention, understanding that every interruption carries a switching cost that reduces overall performance. They use techniques like time blocking, notification management, and environmental design to maintain focus on important tasks. Task batching is a powerful technique for optimizing cognitive efficiency. Similar tasks that require similar mental resources can be grouped together to minimize switching costs. Smart people might batch all their email responses into specific time blocks, group similar phone calls together, or dedicate specific days to particular types of work. This approach reduces the mental overhead of constantly switching between different types of thinking. The concept of energy matching involves aligning different types of tasks with appropriate energy states. Creative work often requires high energy and fresh thinking, while administrative tasks might be done effectively with lower energy levels. Smart people map their typical energy patterns and schedule tasks accordingly, doing their most demanding work when they're at their cognitive peak. Strategic procrastination is different from problematic procrastination. While avoiding important tasks is counterproductive, deliberately delaying less important tasks can be beneficial. Smart people procrastinate strategically on low-priority activities while being disciplined about high-priority ones. They understand that saying yes to everything means saying no to what matters most. The 80/20 principle applies powerfully to time management. Roughly 20% of activities typically produce 80% of results. Smart people continuously analyze their activities to identify which tasks, relationships, and projects provide the highest return on time investment. They then work to increase time spent on high-leverage activities while reducing or eliminating low-value tasks. Delegation and automation are essential skills for intelligent time management. Smart people understand that their time is valuable and look for opportunities to have others do tasks that don't require their specific expertise. They also leverage technology and systems to automate routine tasks, freeing their time and mental energy for activities that require human judgment and creativity. The concept of opportunity cost is central to smart time management. Every minute spent on one activity is a minute not spent on another activity. Smart people regularly evaluate whether their current time allocation is optimal, asking questions like, "Is this the best use of my time right now?" And, "What am I not doing because I'm doing this?" Boundary setting is crucial for protecting time and energy. Smart people learn to say no to requests, invitations, and opportunities that don't align with their priorities. Even when these opportunities seem attractive, they understand that every yes is a no to something else. And they make these trade-offs consciously rather than automatically. Recovery and renewal are essential components of sustainable high performance. Smart people understand that pushing constantly without rest leads to burnout and decreased performance over time. They build regular recovery periods into their schedules, including daily breaks, weekly restoration time, and longer periodic renewals. They view rest not as laziness, but as a strategic investment in sustained performance. Technology can be either a powerful tool for optimization or a major source of distraction. Smart people use technology strategically, leveraging tools that enhance their capabilities while being vigilant about digital distractions. They customize their digital environments to support their goals rather than undermine them. Finally, smart people understand that time and energy optimization is an ongoing process that requires regular evaluation and adjustment. They track their performance patterns, experiment with different approaches, and continuously refine their systems based on results. They treat optimization as a skill to be developed rather than a problem to be solved once. Chapter 15. Integration and implementation. Everything you've learned throughout this journey means nothing without consistent implementation. Smart people understand that knowledge without action is merely entertainment. The gap between knowing what to do and actually doing it consistently is where most people fail to achieve their potential. This final chapter is about bridging that gap and creating lasting change in your life. The first principle of successful implementation is starting small and building momentum. Most people fail to implement new habits and systems because they try to change too much too quickly. They attempt dramatic transformations that are unsustainable and abandon their efforts when they inevitably fall short of unrealistic expectations. Smart people understand that small, consistent changes compound into extraordinary results over time. Begin by choosing 1 or 2 principles from everything you've learned and focus exclusively on implementing those before adding additional elements. This might mean starting with just 10 minutes of daily learning, or developing a simple reflection practice, or beginning to ask better questions in conversations. The specific starting point matters less than the consistency of practice. The concept of keystone habits is crucial for successful implementation. Keystone habits are behaviors that naturally trigger other positive behaviors. Exercise, for example, often leads to better eating, improved sleep, and increased productivity. Meditation might lead to better emotional regulation, improved focus, and more thoughtful decision-making. Identify which habits might serve as keystones in your life and prioritize developing those. Environmental design is one of the most powerful tools for ensuring successful implementation. Your environment should make good choices easy and bad choices difficult. This might mean setting up a dedicated learning space, removing distractions from your work environment, or surrounding yourself with visual reminders of your goals and priorities. Smart people understand that willpower is limited, so they design their environments to support their desired behaviors automatically. Tracking and measurement are essential for maintaining progress and motivation. What gets measured gets managed. Create simple systems for tracking your progress on the behaviors you're trying to develop. This might be a simple checklist, a habit tracker app, or a journal where you record daily progress. The act of measurement itself often improves performance by increasing awareness and accountability. Social accountability can dramatically improve implementation success. Share your learning goals and implementation plans with people who will support your growth and hold you accountable for your commitments. This might involve finding an accountability partner, joining a learning group, or simply telling friends and family about your objectives. The knowledge that others are aware of your goals increases the likelihood that you'll follow through. The practice of systematic reflection is crucial for continuous improvement. Smart people regularly evaluate their progress, identify what's working and what isn't, and adjust their approaches based on evidence. This might involve weekly or monthly reviews where you assess your progress, celebrate successes, and identify areas for improvement. During these reflection sessions, ask yourself important questions. What behaviors have I successfully implemented? What obstacles have I encountered? How can I adjust my approach to be more effective? What have I learned about myself through this process? This systematic reflection prevents you from continuing ineffective approaches and helps you optimize your implementation strategies. Identity-based change is more powerful than outcome-based change. Instead of focusing solely on what you want to achieve, focus on who you want to become. Every action you take is a vote for the type of person you want to be. When you read for 10 minutes, you're voting for being a learner. When you ask thoughtful questions, you're voting for being a curious person. When you practice emotional regulation, you're voting for being an emotionally intelligent person. This identity-based approach makes behavior change more sustainable because it aligns your actions with your sense of self rather than relying on motivation or willpower. You don't have to force yourself to do things that learning-oriented people do. You do them because that's who you are. The compound effect is the most important concept to understand for long-term success. Small improvements made consistently over time create extraordinary results. A 1% improvement every day leads to being 37 times better over a year. The challenge is that this improvement is often invisible in the short term, which is why most people give up before the compounding becomes obvious. Smart people understand that the most important changes are often the least dramatic in the moment, but the most powerful over time. They focus on process improvements rather than outcome achievements, knowing that better processes inevitably lead to better outcomes. Dealing with setbacks and failures is an inevitable part of any implementation process. Smart people expect setbacks and prepare for them mentally and strategically. When they fail to follow through on their commitments, they treat these failures as information rather than evidence of personal inadequacy. They ask what they can learn from the failure and how they can adjust their approach to be more successful. The goal is progress, not perfection. You will have days when you don't follow through on your commitments, when you fall back into old patterns, when you feel like you're not making progress. This is normal and expected. The key is to get back on track quickly rather than using setbacks as excuses to abandon your efforts entirely. Integration across different life domains is essential for sustainable change. The principles you've learned don't apply only to professional development or intellectual growth. They apply to relationships, health, finance, and every other area of life. Look for opportunities to apply growth mindset, systems thinking, emotional intelligence, and other concepts across all aspects of your life. Finally, remember that becoming smarter is not a destination, but a journey. The goal is not to reach some fixed state of intelligence, but to continuously grow, adapt, and improve throughout your life. The world will continue to change rapidly, and your ability to learn, adapt, and grow will determine your continued success and fulfillment. The people who stay ahead of 99% of others are not those who reach some pinnacle of achievement and stop growing. They are those who make continuous learning and improvement a permanent part of their identity. They understand that in a rapidly changing world, the only constant is change, and the only sustainable advantage is the ability to learn and adapt faster than others. Start today. Choose one principle from everything you've learned and begin implementing it immediately. Your future self will thank you for taking action today, rather than waiting for the perfect moment that will never come. The journey of continuous growth and improvement begins with a single step, taken today, in the direction of who you want to become.